Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the 2020 Ontario One Call Annual General Meeting. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I would like to welcome everyone to our annual general meeting. As a not-for-profit with an open model of governance, member engagement is an important part of our mandate. In spite of the challenging times we face, we are holding our annual general meeting today as originally scheduled through an online platform. While we are not able to meet in person and hold our usual Q&A, we have solicited questions from participants and will answer some of those as we move through our presentations today. Voting will be done by electronic ballot and start after the conclusion of this meeting. Voting will be open for your convenience until 11 p.m. tonight. Members who are registered by June 22nd have been contacted to determine which individual would be responsible for casting that member's ballot. Those individuals have already been provided with the appropriate information and instructions. However, if you have any questions, please reach out by email to Corey Officer at COFFICER, C Officer at ON1, the number 1, CALL.com. Members today will vote on the following items: the appointment of directors, the appointment of auditors, and the proposed change to the fee schedule. For more procedural matters, such as accepting minutes and adjournment, the members of the Board of Directors are unmuted for this conference call and will move and second those items. To respect those listening and to ensure an efficient call, unless a director opposes, I will proceed as the motion being carried. So let's get on with some of the governance matters. The minutes of last year's AGM have been circulated. Shall the minutes be approved?
It's Enrico Scalera. I move the minutes.
Dean Delpy, I second.
Thank you. The motion is carried. As there are no specific items in the minutes that were to be reported on at the next AGM, we will proceed to the report from the chair. Two 2019 included a number of important steps taken by Ontario One Call. At this meeting today, we'll review our progress on a number of items, as well as conduct important governance matters to ensure that Ontario One Call keeps moving forward. Recent appointments to the Board of Directors have increased our capabilities in the areas of board governance, human resources, and legal expertise. Through our annual skills matrix evaluation, the board will continue to seek candidates who provide the diversity of skills, backgrounds, experience required to guide a unique organization such as Ontario One Call. We have an important relationship with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. In 2017, we signed a new memorandum of understanding with the ministry, which outlines our accountabilities through 2022. The board is very mindful of the essential role Ontario One Call plays in our economy. We are very satisfied that we have been able to maintain uninterrupted service to those who rely upon us to safely support the important construction work that has kept our province running. We continue to monitor the operational and financial status of the organization to ensure we deliver on our important mandate. Our vision, protecting your community from the loss of service and harm caused by damages to underground infrastructure, guides us to making Ontario a safer place. We want to make this a damage-free province where there are no damages to buried infrastructure, where workers and the public can all go home safely. Together, we are working diligently to make that a reality. At this point, I would like to ask Ben Hamilton, Executive Director of Ontario One Call, to address the membership.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's a real pleasure to speak to you today. Judging by the list, we have 127 participants joining us today, which is a great turnout under the circumstances, and I hope you're all enjoying the format we've provided. My objective today is to present the membership, our stakeholders and excavators, with information that'll certainly increase understanding of our operations and our activities in 2019 and also 2020 and beyond, but also give them actionable items that they can take back to the office and utilize to increase their efficiency and productivity in working with the One Call system. So just on the first slide, I'll start with a couple key numbers that are very germane to what we're working on this year on Ontario One Call. A lot of you will know when we bought in map selection notification several years ago, the real focus was to reduce the over notifications received by members and thereby reduce their back office costs in clearing these notifications. And we've tracked that over the last number of years, and we've determined that the savings that members themselves have seen on an annual basis is almost $10 million now. So that's the difference between notifications they would have received under the previous system and notifications they're currently receiving. So for example, in the first quarter of this year, notifications were up over 4%, requests were up by over 4%, but notifications were only up by 1%. And that reflects how the map selection system works, how it reduces over notification and reduces costs that members pre-MSN would have had to pay because they would have been clearing and processing these requests, which were outside of the excavation area. So just that one project alone, which cost probably $500,000, that one project saves the members on an annual basis a sum of money that's greater than the cost of running the entire One Call system. So I think that's a really important example of the mindset of Ontario One Call and how we're focused on taking action that uses members' money, but uses it in a way that saves the members multiples of their contributions. And it's an important example about how we're careful and mindful about using members' money for the members' benefit. Minus 35%, that's the decrease in request volume from April 2020 versus April 2019. And this is really to give us a sense of how COVID has impacted our operations on Ontario One Call, but most importantly, the excavation work that's being done in the field and the requests that members are receiving. Just at a high level, roughly speaking, in April, volumes of requests dropped from about 120,000 last year to 80,000 this year. But when we look into June, we expect a 27% volume increase year over year. So roughly speaking, we're going to go from 125,000 requests in June 2019 to 155,000 in June 2020. And as I mentioned before, in Q1, before COVID really hit, our year-over-year volumes were up 4%. So the upshot of that means that our expectation is by around the end of July or maybe into early August, the 2020 volumes will have caught up to 2019. And I'm pretty certain that by the end of 2020, the number of requests processed by Ontario One Call will be clearly higher than in 2019's volume. So what we've seen over the last couple of months is certainly a large initial reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic and the response taken by government and excavation companies and utilities. But those volumes quickly reversed themselves. And at this moment, we're in a very busy period of excavation. June 2020 will be by far the busiest month in terms of requests processed by Ontario One Call. And already we've seen the resilience and the bounce back ability, you could say, of Ontario's excavation sector. So those are very important metrics in terms of measuring the industry's response to the COVID pandemic. On the next slide, I'll talk just quickly about some of last year's priorities to talk about what was accomplished. The board approved funding for members to support the cost of participating in the ORCGA DIRG report. These are for the top 20 members of Ontario One Call who do about 2/3 of the excavation work. We've taken a real targeted approach to increase participation in the ORCGA DIRG report. When we look at doing bylaw review this fall, there'll also be further language around participation in the DIRG report. And the view of the board and the organization is that participation in the DIRG report is essential to ensure that members and excavators and stakeholders have a real solid statistical, factual understanding of the lay of the land when it comes to damage prevention in Ontario. And that information is vital so we can effectively guide our future actions and future decisions to protect safety in Ontario. So that was an important priority in 2019, and we'll continue that with actions in 2020. Katie Gosman, our Director of Operations, will speak about the homeowner single property ticket. That's a really great example of the innovations that Ontario One Call is bringing forward to simplify the process for more basic requests, but also add granularity and detail for larger projects happening in the public right-of-way. So that's a great example about how we're changing and evolving the system to make sure it's best suited for the different types of work that are happening. We also implemented new system improvements, new icons, and new mapping tools in 2019. Ian Simpson, our Director of Education, Training, and Compliance, will talk about what's called PLAC, the Professional Locator Administrative course, which we developed in 2019 and will be rolling out this fall to increase the understanding and literacy of people who enter tickets into the system and maximize their productivity and accuracy. Number 5, we've also spoken about map selection notifications. And the best thing about MSN is that while the annual savings have reached almost $10 million, those savings increase year over year as members improve and refine their mapping, their system settings, and their records. So MSN is actually a great example of something that's not just a one-off benefit, but one that provides sustained and increasing benefits year over year. And those are the types of opportunities that we look for when we think about how to spend members' money and how to improve our system. On the next slide, just to wrap up the list of 2019 priorities, the board has approved its first 5-year financial forecast as part of its regular strategic planning process. We also changed the timing of the bylaw and fee schedule changes to coincide with the June AGM. And that was really focused and based on members' concerns about doing some of those changes in December, right before the start of most people's fiscal year. Now the fee schedule changes have been moved to June. Typically, we would do the bylaw review in June as we did last year. The circumstances this year mean that we're going to be looking to do a bylaw review in September and October, so stay tuned for those communications. But that's just an unfortunate circumstance of the pandemic. Typically, we're now in a bylaw and fee schedule review cycle that'll only take place at the June AGM. The marketing and education strategies have been enhanced, and a definite focus on online targeting of individuals who are actively engaged in looking for excavation topics and excavation information. The bylaws were improved last year to address the mandates of board committees and lengthen the terms of board members to provide more continuity. And as Scott mentioned before, those changes complement other changes the board have made, including developing a skills matrix and a board self-evaluation to improve the governance of the board. And the board has also improved their governance by working with the Institute of Corporate Directors, the ICD, to provide annual training for the board. And that first session took place in February. So that's an important part about what the board is focused on, improving their governance and their performance. And as I just mentioned, the skills matrix survey has been a big part of recruiting our new board members. We now have members on the board with legal and board governance expertise. And that's really important to round out the diverse skill sets of the board. Previously, the board had a very operational heavy focus, which is to be expected. But we also want to make sure that the board is skilled in areas of finance and law and public affairs and governance. And that's something that our current chair, Scott Moody, has really helped the board improve on its journey. Looking forward to 2020, there's 10 key priorities that we've identified here. Establishing mandatory damage reporting is a key priority. That'll be included in the bylaw discussion we'll have later this fall. Members should expect to see something in September with further information. And mandatory damage reporting is a really important part of ensuring we have a good understanding of, first off, how the law is working in Ontario. It's important to measure the impact of the one call regime on the number of damages in Ontario, but more importantly, to help guide and direct members and excavators in their own damage prevention efforts to make sure that they have a good statistical understanding of geographic concerns, of types of excavation. We want to make sure that people working in the field have a good understanding about where their attention and their resourcing needs to be. We'll continue to develop the new simplified ticket entry platform for homeowners and smaller contractors. Katie Gossman will talk about some of the beta testing we'll be doing and how that'll roll out in the future. Concurrent with that, also advances in the entry platform for excavators working in the public right-of-way. So there'll be a simplified version for more simple requests, but also one with more detail for work in the public right-of-way. And that's to give locators and members the right type of granularity in terms of helping them respond effectively to these different types of requests. And as mentioned before, improving ticket quality by launching certification training for system users, and that's the professional locator administrator course. With governance and accountability, we're going to codify policies and help members and excavators understand procedures such as sharing locates and compliance actions. Bab Mystery from the Operations Committee will talk about some of those initiatives and topics. We've completed an enterprise risk management review and are going to implement some changes to enhance member confidence in our system security and our IT security, which of course is an increasing and paramount concern with any operation with a heavy IT focus like ours. I'll talk in a bit about the late locate symposium that was held in December 2019, but we'll be continuing the work of that group in 2020 and certainly beyond. When you look to the openness and transparency topics, modernizing Ontario One Call's bylaws, as I mentioned before, we'll look to do that in the fall. Ideally, we would have done that at this meeting, but just the pandemic issues prevented that. So keep an eye open in September for more information on modernizing One Call's bylaws. Reviewing the fee schedule and evaluating new incentive-based billing models is actually concurrent with that review. So we'll be looking to provide more information to members on those proposals soon. And as mentioned before, implement new board training and board development sessions. That's been a real priority of the chair and the board. We've made great progress with our skills matrix and our training with the Institute of Corporate Directors, and we'll continue to develop and advance those topics going forward. On the next slide, I want to talk a bit about our COVID-19 response. I think all our members and excavators were deeply affected by the emergence of COVID-19, both on a human basis, but also on an operational basis. From the One Call perspective, we saw almost immediately on March 17th, based on the announcements of Premier Ford, pretty drastic and immediate changes in request volumes. And then come later in May, when Ford announced the loosening and opening of some of those restrictions, there was also a very quick response in terms of excavation activities. So there's been enormous shifts of activity that we've seen, and it's definitely been very much driven by provincial directives. Thankfully, though, our employees have been able to work safely from a work-from-home model since mid-March. All of our phone and online services have been continued without interruption, and not just the taking of tickets and the processing of tickets, but also the normal member services. So members who need to update their mapping, change their filter settings, those services have also continued without interruption. And I think we're all very happy and we're all very proud that we've been able to provide that measure of continuity in a time of enormous shift and enormous change. Our employee safety is our paramount concern. The offices have been closed since mid-March, both our Guelph office and our Sudbury office. They'll have a partial reopening in early July, primarily for a handful of employees who've not been able to work from home for various technical reasons. We'll have a lot of features in place in the office: hand-free door openers, increased sanitation, physical spacing between workstations, also increased physical barriers and capacity limits have all been implemented, and those will all be in place to ensure the safety of employees. And this reopening will only occur after inspection and approval by our Joint Health and Safety Committee. So we've been able to provide a lot of continuity, and any reopening that we do will be very cautious and measured, and only done so when we're fully satisfied of the employees' safety. On to the Late Locate Symposium. So one challenge that we've all been working with, whether you're a member, an excavator, One Call, a stakeholder, we've all been working on late locates and the challenges that late locates provide. And, a lot of these changes are happening in the context of a very vigorous economy with increases year over year, well above any kind of inflationary pressure. And even more challenging this year in the context of COVID, where we've had very sudden and immediate changes to volumes. So late locates continues to be a primary focus of everyone involved in the One Call process. To help address late locates directly, Ontario One Call hosted the Late Locate Symposium in December 2019. And it was a real collaborative model that brought together members, excavators, locate service providers, and Ontario One Call staff to develop solutions for late locate challenges. Right off the bat, we recognized that it wasn't just a question of one party or one group of people coming up with a magical solution. It was an approach that required a real collaborative approach. And we wanted to take steps that would be implemented in 2020, but would also have benefits beyond 2020. So we were looking in both the short term and also the medium and longer term. We really looked at 5 different topics that I'll cover here. On the next slide, we have them laid out for you. The first, and certainly the one I think that gets the most conversation when it comes to things like the ORCGA conference and the ORCGA geographic councils, is dedicated locator. Dedicated locator is a model where project-based excavation. So these might be things like fiber to home projects, which are long duration, large geography projects, or more complex projects like transit projects, which don't cover a large geography in a given year, but are extremely complex. There's a certain cohort of projects where the needs of the excavator are complex to the point where it makes sense for them to control the locating resource and to hire the locating resource to maximize their own productivity. And a number of members, through the Locate Alliance Consortium, but also through their own initiatives, have enabled dedicated locator for certain types of projects. And certainly at the Late Locate Symposium, there was a general consensus that dedicated locator is a real win-win scenario where members can provide the service to these excavators, and the excavators are much more comfortable paying for these resources, controlling these resources, and directing these resources, because that is what's best for the productivity and efficiency of their project. So dedicated locator is certainly a platform that members and excavators are mutually working on to increase the knowledge of and also the use of. Forecasting was also an important part. We heard from LSPs and members that forecasting accurately was a challenge. There are both underlying economic growth factors we've seen in Ontario, but also a lot of project-driven changes that we see year over year. Things like transit projects and private home projects, they're not necessarily regularly occurring projects. And there's been a lot of geographies where one year's volume has been drastically affected and increased by projects that weren't necessarily communicated in advance and were unanticipated when members and LSPs determining their resource for a given year. So working with members and municipalities and excavators in a more collaborative way at the local level is a way that we're looking to increase the forecasting abilities of LSPs and members. Data in and data out was looking at the real productivity of the system, how tickets are entered, what information is required, and how Ontario One Call can improve that. Part of that will be through training, which Ian Simpson will talk about, but also as part of it about how Ontario One Call configures the system and what kind of information we can provide to members and the excavators and requesters can provide to members that will maximize productivity. We also focused on pressure points, which were focusing on a couple key issues and bottlenecks in the whole locate process, and also enforcement and compliance. And we'll see a lot of that logic in enforcement and compliance when it comes to the bylaw changes this fall. One issue above and beyond the bylaw changes was also an interest in greater communication on Ontario One Call policies and procedures, and how Ontario One Call can refine some things just to make it more collaborative. So for example, we've simplified and clarified the process between an informal complaint and a formal complaint. And that's been helpful for members in terms of helping them understand the compliance process and making sure that they're able to respond to informal complaints in a proper way and work more collaboratively with excavators. And that one change itself has created a lot more of a collaborative environment between excavators and members this year. And that's been a big help in dealing with the COVID situation. We've seen a real understanding approach by excavators, which has been very heartening to see. And we've seen a really good response too from members in terms of responding to the needs and the pressures of excavators. So we're hoping in the longer term to move to a much more collaborative footing when it comes to the day-to-day challenges of providing locates. We'll talk a bit about the fee schedule change. One of the questions we received from our communications to members came from an electric utility which talked about increases and the rationale for increases. And this individual compared it to his utility, which is really you might say is an annual increase based on inflation and a productivity factor, which is common for utilities. You get a certain proportion of inflation, and that's the change to your base every year. Ontario One Call doesn't take that exact approach. We're very mindful of the money we take from members, and we'll look at that at the next slide. But we also want to make sure, and the board has always stressed, that we want to make sure that the organization is well-resourced to respond to the challenges of our membership and excavators, and also has the proper resources to do the job well. So when you think of an example like MSN, we've definitely put more money into the system above and beyond inflation to spend on IT. But that spending has given you things like MSN, which costs, as I said, maybe $500,000 and provides almost $10 million of benefits this year. In fact, it provided net benefits greater than the costs from the first year we turned it on. So there's really lots of opportunities to spend a relatively modest amount of members' money to deliver large and wide benefits to the membership. So in talking about a 2% increase for this year, there's a couple areas where that funding would go. Some of them are more exciting and interesting than others. One is to establish specific dedicated funding to support Ontario One Call's compliance role. Right now, all our compliance activity is funded out of our general salary budgets, and we want to make sure that there's proper resourcing for the compliance activities that Ontario One Call does. And we'll talk more about that in the fall, about some of the procedural parts. But it's important to remember that this is an important mandate under the law. It's an important part of the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification System Act, typically called the One Call Bill, which passed a number of years ago. And I want to make sure there's proper funding there. And a lot of that funding goes to the compliance staff that members and excavators deal with on a daily basis. They're the ones who help receive complaints and work with members to solve the complaints before it escalates beyond that. So there's a lot of good collaborative activity that this funding supports. Also, increased telecommunications costs related to increased usage of the web ticket platform. While there are decreasing phone volumes that we've received, At the same time, there's increasing usage of the web ticket, and with that comes some pretty substantial telecommunications costs. For example, when you're entering a ticket and you're drawing on the Google map, that has a very specific bandwidth cost, and it's not an inexpensive cost. So while some costs are being reduced in terms of the number of people hours spent on the phone, it also comes with a commensurate cost of increased telecommunications, and also normal inflationary costs for compensation and services received by Ontario One Call. So it's a modest increase in line with inflation, but it's going to a couple of key areas. I should also note too that increases in previous years have also given us a good base for some of the technological changes we've made. So when Katie talks about bringing forward the new ticket platform for homeowners and private property tickets, and then Katie talks about some of the changes we're making to tickets in the public right-of-way, those projects are already funded by increases the membership have already approved. So it's not like we're going to be asking for further increases for what Katie's talking about. Those projects are moving forward because the membership approved those funding changes, and in the very near future, the membership will see the great benefits that will come from that. On the next slide, so we have a very conservative outlook when it comes to members and taking members' money. As we've said before, we really want to demonstrate that we're spending members' money prudently. We also want to demonstrate that we're very mindful of their budgets regardless of that. And we understand that our members, who are largely municipalities and utilities and industrial companies, they all suffer financial pressures. These pressures are only magnified by the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. And we really want to be respectful of the money we're asking for. If you look at the first chart, this is the historic and projected revenues of Ontario One Call. We use 2015 as the base because 2015 was the first full year of a mandatory one call system in Ontario. And as you see, over the subsequent 7 years, and this goes through the 2021 proposal that we'll ask members to support today, the average annual change has actually been a decrease of a little under 1%. So we're not an organization that's been asking for inflationary increases year after year. Each year we've been very prudent and very cautious in terms of how we're spending members' money and the money we're asking for from the membership. So I think the chart on the left demonstrates, restraint and respect for members' money. And it all relates to productivity as well. And I think it's important for organizations like Ontario One Call, who are legally mandated services, to still demonstrate productivity and efficiency with members' money. And when you look at a measure of efficiency, we have cost per ticket here. All throughout this 7-year period, our costs have been relatively flat. But of course, the volume of tickets we receive have been going up 4 to 5% every year. So we've been doing more and more work and producing more and more units for the members at a decreasing average cost. So our costs per ticket have actually declined 21% since 2015. And that's a real reflection of our efficiency, but also the investments that we've made on members' behalf into our IT systems and into improving the member experience and giving members more specific results, things like MSN. So you see a real positive story about the overall respect for money, and also an important story about the productivity as well. And I think those two things demonstrate our approach to asking for fee increases. So talking about the next steps, looking forward in 2020 and beyond, and this will be my last slide. The bylaw review and the fee schedule review will take place this fall. We're asking for the 2% increase as part of today's vote, but in the fall we may come to the membership with proposed changes to the fee schedule methodology. So there's really two parts to the fee schedule. One is the assessment amount, and the second part is how that is divvied up amongst the membership. At today's AGM, we're only asking for a change to the assessment amount. In the future, we may ask for a change in how that's divvied up in some of the methodology. So that methodology might take place in the fall, but right now we're only asking for a change to the assessment amount. Work on the late locate symposium will continue. I know Ian Simpson, who's the lead for this project, has already scheduled further meetings with the Late Locate Symposium participants, and those participants have also been broken out into working groups on those 5 topics. That work's been somewhat sidelined over the last couple of months with the COVID pandemic, but we'll get those back on track in July. And during this challenging time, we'll continue to provide our normal work of receiving requests, of helping members, of handling complaints, and doing our best to improve the day-to-day operations of the system. So in this challenging time, which has really affected everyone's lives, their careers and their livelihoods and their companies, at Ontario One Call, we've tried our best to ensure that we provide continuity. And, you know, I'm so proud and impressed by the work that our staff have done. Just on a personal note, when this pandemic was breaking out, I was actually in Australia. I was out of the country. And the whole process of moving the staff to a work from home model, I was only able to participate in conference calls in the middle of the night. It was really up to my staff and all the individual employees to set up the work from home model. And they've done a phenomenal job in that week, but ever since, they've also done a phenomenal job just dealing with the daily challenges of working from home, the challenges of communication, and also just the challenges of their own day-to-day lives with, you know, the challenges that their spouse or their children or their family members might face. They've really gone above and beyond the call to ensure that our important service was maintained and that Ontario One Call was able to provide some normalcy in a very turbulent world. So I'm so impressed and grateful for the work they've all done. With that, I'll pass it back to Scott for the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Ben. So now, Karen Marner, the chair of our Finance and Risk Committee, will go through our finances and ask for approval of our auditors. Karen?
Thanks, Scott. Ontario One Call remains in a strong financial position. Revenues were right on the target of $8.3 million in 2019. Due to our assessment-based revenue model, the organization's income is largely fixed. However, our revenues vary slightly from the revenue target year by year, depending on the member's use of discretionary services, such as lookup, additional reporting services, and call-outs. Total expenses grew in 2019 to $9.2 million from $8.4 million in 2018. This is primarily due to increased investment in new software platforms. This resulted in higher IT costs and also in higher amortization on the capitalized items of those software, in addition to some additional staffing costs. Cash and cash equivalents were at $4 million at the end of 2019. The board has approved this amount, moving to $3 million in future years to allow for future system investment and to mitigate the impact on any fee increases potential for the membership. In spite of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on our province, the financial outlook for Ontario One Call is positive. The board will continue to monitor opportunities such as reduced office operating expenses, lower advertising spending to conserve members' money and to cover future costs. Next slide. At this time, oh, sorry, I thought there was one for the appointment of the auditors. Members are asked to approve Donna A. Goldstein, Chartered Accountant Professional Corporation, as the Ontario One Call Independent Auditor for the 2020 and 2021 year. Members will be asked to vote electronically at the end of this meeting. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Karen. We do have one more voting item here. The process to select members of the Board of Directors described in Ontario One Call Bylaw number 2, Article 12. As required, Governance and Nominations Committee has received nominations for the open board positions and have prepared the following slate of directors. You'll see those on your screen. Members are asked to vote electronically at the end of this meeting, and voting is open now. Okay, so now at this point, we'll be handing it over to Bav Mistry for our report from our Operations Committee. Bav?
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. So as chair of the Operations Committee, I'm pleased to provide an update on the committee's activities in 2019. So I'll start by introducing the committee itself. So this is our list of members and the sectors that they represent. So Nectar Tampakopoulos is our new vice chair effective last November. So he's taking over from John Huber from Enbridge. And I'd just like to highlight our newest members. They're highlighted in green, starting with Nick DeStefano, Terry Hall, Mike McIvery, Reza Habibullahi, Chris Face, and Andrew Cotton-Lundberg. And I'd also like to sincerely thank John Huber, Kevin DeCare, Andy Bacher, and Sean Bissell for their contributions and their input over the last 4 or 5 years that really helped shape the work that the committee has done. So these are your sector reps, and I do encourage you to use your sector reps to bring forward your issues and concerns, and of course your suggestions to make the system and process work better. So whether you're a utility member, an excavator, or an LSP, your feedback is important to us. So next slide, please. So I'll touch on some of the work done by the Operations Committee during 2019. So first off is the terms of reference. So this was modified to allow a third 3-year term. This is consistent with the board's terms of reference. And this change has allowed the committee to maintain stability and continuity. And given that you just saw the recent movement of committee members due to retirements and new roles, this is especially important. So Ben mentioned work is underway with respect to the bylaws, and the committee is really keen to provide input to proposed changes and to also recommend changes that are in the best interest of all stakeholders. So you heard about potential changes to fee structure that takes into account the members' locate performance, and so the committee is working on providing feedback and suggestions to take a more holistic view of the proposed model. And we'll hear about that more in September, as Ben mentioned. So last year, the committee provided input from which a number of changes were implemented. So, for example, ensuring proper governance on fee setting, establishing a clear and transparent process for appeals, and lastly, the change in the timing of voting that Ben also mentioned to better align with members' typical budgeting cycle. So next I'll speak about the Project Locate initiative. So a great deal of thought has been put into understanding what's required for a Project Locate. And we've looked at it from several perspectives, that of the requester submitting a request, Ontario One Call to process the request, and then the member or LSP performing the locate itself. So some of the recommendations that came out of the business requirements document that was developed are being incorporated in the enhanced web portal that will be rolled out in 2021, which Katie will be speaking to. And so for the remaining requirements that haven't been incorporated, the committee will continue to work with Ontario One Call to ensure that future enhancements address what was identified. So we hear repeatedly that tickets are more complex and larger in size, and we need a system that reflects that. So I think we all agree that this needs to work better. So regarding system enhancements, a number of features, as Ben also mentioned, were incorporated and vetted through the committee, and so we are quite involved. For example, the icons to drag and drop boreholes and posts make it easier to submit requests and provide information to the locator. So we continue to be involved with Katie, and her team to provide feedback and suggestions. And lastly, about map coordinates, that was something that was mentioned last year. So the lat and long is something that many members have asked for. It's being piloted right now. And after some delays, we do expect that it will be available this year. So we're quite excited about that. On the Late Locate Symposium, really pleased to say that the committee was extensively involved. We had 4 committee members participate in the Locate Symposium itself out of the 25 that participated in total. So as committee members, I feel we have a unique perspective and insight, and that's because of our involvement with Ontario One Call at an operational level. We have an understanding of some of the limitations of the system and some of the challenges with the regulations. And of course, we bring our sector experience. So the committee assisted beyond the symposium with implementing some of the recommendations to impact 2020 dig season. But we also recognize that many great ideas were brought forward that require a longer time frame to implement, and we will continue to assist where we can. Then talked about dedicated locator, and that's something that the committee continues to support. In fact, many of our committee members have had great success with the model. And though it was raised at the Late Locate Symposium, support and discussions of the model were taking place well before the symposium itself. So I do encourage any member or excavator who's interested to reach out, to a committee member or Ontario One Call Member Services for information on how the model works and the benefits. You'll find that there's many approaches, and you just have to find the one that works for your organization. So locate validity, that's a topic that's been brought forward to the committee many times, and we continue to work on it. Many of you have raised the need to simplify the dates on a locate and have asked for consistency in the validity period. So no surprise that this also came up during the Late Locate Symposium. So on the committee, we are doing what we can to encourage members to start with reviewing their current validity periods and consider extending them to 60 days or more if they're not already there. We know that both excavators and members will benefit. So improved communication has been an important goal for the committee. We've made great strides, beginning with ensuring the committee is aligned with the board and Ontario One Call. The committee provides key input on messaging and content, for example, through memos on various topics to help members and excavators. So last year's messaging, you would have seen, was on managing locates, using ALAs, the dedicated locator model. And this year's memo was issued on sharing locates, and that was based on a recommendation from the Late Locate Symposium. So for 2020, the committee is focused on continuing making improvements to the systems and process, increase communication, and advocate for all stakeholders for a safe dig season this year and every year. So I'll end by asking each of you to think about what you can do to make the system safer and more efficient for all. It really does start with each of us, right? Making one small and positive change at a time. Thank you. And Scott, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Bev. I believe at this point in the agenda, we will move to Katie Gottsman for a presentation on some of the system changes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to start with the successes of 2019 for Ontario One Call. As many of you are aware, Ontario One Call created something called Mass Selection Notification in late 2017, and this was to help reduce the number of members notified per locate request. In 2018, Ontario One Call saw a 6.2 members per locate request, and that went down to 6.04 by the end of 2019. And we are seeing a continued average reduction of 0.3 members per locate request as we roll into 2020. I will remind everybody that before map selection notification, we had over 7 and close to 8 in some peak season months before this was released. As this works in conjunction with the map selections created on the web portal by excavators, along with the mapping information provided by members into our backend system, so where the infrastructure is located, we are doing a reach out to members to reduce these coverages where it is possible to do so. So for example, if there's no infrastructure in a specific area, but a member has a larger map within our system for any reason, we can work to see if there's possible for reduction and continued reduction in the members per locate request. The next success has been our phone to web transition, which occurred in April 2019. We have seen an increase in web tickets from the end of 2018 from 76% to 84% by March 2020. This was done in order to allow excavators to create their own map selections right within the web portal because it means more accurate information for the locator. When an agent is creating a map selection on behalf of an excavator through a phone call, we have specific rules to follow to ensure that we're not missing members, as we cannot accidentally draw in the wrong location. So this does help improve the overall process for everybody. In order to support individuals going to the web, we did have an increase in the training for our staffing for basic troubleshooting with internet issues or the web portal or other items that might come up. As well, we have a client services department who is great at helping individuals get through some very specific issues they might have using the service. And finally, in 2019, we finished off with an 85% overall service level, which exceeds our target of 80%. And this is 80% of calls answered in 20 seconds or less. So exceeding that is a great success because it means providing greater service to our excavating community. Next slide, please. So I just mentioned a second ago about the mapping coverage for members within our system. And I just wanted to touch on some of the benefits of this. Of course, if you have fewer notifications, you're looking at the potential for a reduction in the locate and administration costs. Many of our members still will roll a truck even if they know there's no infrastructure in the area because they have it mapped in our system. This happens for many reasons, many of them good ones at this point, but we're looking to see if there's a possibility for change in that. Other members also provide their own clears in-house, which means they're taking up some resources to do that when potentially they have good enough maps they can share with us and therefore not receive those notifications in the first place. There is the promise of improved locate timeliness if locators have fewer members per locate request to mark for. This, of course, means being able to get through a site potentially faster, again, back to better management of their resources. And finally, there's an improvement in communication between the excavator and the locator. The clearer the ticket information is in respect to the members we notify, the better information the excavator knows to work with, the fewer locate sheets they have to work with and organize, and the same is true for locators. As a member, if you have any questions or would like to discover this process, please contact us at memberservices@OntarioOneCall.ca. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking forward, it's been mentioned many times today and in the past, Ontario One Call is always looking to make improvements. We have made great strides and we're not done. So the next thing we're looking at is the improvement of our web portal in general. We're asking for many more users to go directly to the portal to submit your locate requests for some of the practical reasons I've mentioned today. So we think it's only fair to make this an easier process than it is today. So with the new portal, the idea is improved steps and process flows and layout and formatting, and you'll see a little bit of that in the following slides. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, the picture you've been looking at is going to be our new login page. You'll be able to very quickly identify who you are here so you can log in appropriately. Once you've done so for contractors, you're going to have a couple of extra features, including a simple and advanced request, which I'll mention in a little bit. The design and planning request. Though possible today to submit a design and planning request, it is a bit cumbersome. You have to understand the process a little bit in order to achieve it. We're going to remove all those obstacles for you, and you'll be able to quickly get through that. And if you're not digging in the near future, it is highly encouraged that you request this, as it'll help you understand who is in your area a little bit better, even though we do have to put a little stipulation that not all members participate, but it gets you closer to understanding what's going on. And then you'll get a locate once you're ready to dig. Again, the idea is to make the process easy for the management of your requests, from submitting them to searching for them, as well as improving the account settings management for your profiles. For homeowners, they're going to have simple requests as well. Again, easy to use submission and search of tickets. Members, for now, you're going to benefit from the improved formatting and look and feel of the site, and we're going to have future improvements for your portion of the web portal. Next slide, please. Again, mentioned simple and advanced requests, so just want to break that down a little bit for you today. So the simple requests are going to have fewer questions than the advanced ones. They're going to accept single civics on this request. So this will be typical for private property or small size excavations or private commercial properties that have a registered lot or civic. These requests will be validated and to make sure that the excavation size is adhering to a lot size potentially. And this is to ensure that people who have smaller excavations, such as landscapers, potentially paving driveways, or put in a parking lot or something in a private commercial setting, you want to get in and out and get these locate requests done quickly. So this is to allow you to do that. For the advanced request, we're looking at a few additional questions. This will include a permit number, a project number. If you have one yourself, you can type it in so you can better manage your own project and organize as appropriately, and an expected end date of the excavation. So we understand that excavation dates change and things may go up ahead about differently if depending on the situation. However, at the time of your submission, what the expected end date of your excavation is. On these requests, you will not need a civic, or you can attach multiple civics. This will be typical of larger excavations with extended lengths, such as roadwork, etc. And these requests will also have the map selection limits that may be imposed in the future to allow for improved communication. Extremely large tickets, so 10, 20, 30 kilometers that do occur, are very hard for locators to identify where you're starting and what points you need located at what time. And this is going to help increase the information provided to locators to organize better and work with excavators more appropriately. Next slide, please. One of the changes that I think that people who use this ticket submission software are going to appreciate is the change to the map. Today you have to fill in your municipality, your civic, big street, cross streets, etc. Before you ever load the map. In the future, you're going to have something that is akin to a Google address bar. You're going to be able to start typing in your full address, which will narrow down your search. As you type, you'll select where you're excavating, and it'll pop up for you similar to today. You'll make your map selection, and you're essentially done at that point. Next slide, please. So the system is going to be designed to try to get as much information for you as possible and fill in those blanks so you don't have to do it anymore. There will be some instances where your information that you put into this address bar will not quite match our backend system, as they are still two different maps that try to talk to each other. However, our system is going to be much more generous in trying to populate the places that it thinks that, that you intend. So, next slide, please. A little example of what I mean. I made a map selection in Sault Ste. Marie on March Street, but because I didn't have a civic, the system said, I just want to make sure I've got you pinpointed where you wanted to dig, where you meant. So it fills out Sault Ste. Marie for me, March Street for me, and chose the closest intersecting street for me because it knows I have to fill in one of the two. But just because the way I drew my map selection, Albert Street is sort of being crossed over and heading towards Queen Street and Wellington, the system was maybe not 100% sure. So it says, could you just fill out this one for me? The information will be narrowed down for you. So you'll only have the streets available closest to your map selection and the dig street you provided. And you'll be able to either type them in or just select them from the drop-down, and you're done. Next slide. Another change we're making is to how we're asking for the information that you're providing to us as an excavator. So right now we have a lot of checkboxes next to somewhat ambiguous information or words. We're going to change that to get the best possible quality of information from the excavators. So this information is going to also come with some helpful hints for those areas where perhaps it's a little bit more difficult to understand what is being asked for. This way you can get through the process faster, provide good information that the locators can work with much easier. Next slide, please. And we're adding more space to what today is called the detailed description of the work. We're going to rename that to additional information, and you're going to have a much larger character limit to describe your work area, as well as some more instruction and hints as to what should go in this specific spot. Next slide, please. And as this item is still in development, it's quite a large change. A couple of extra things that are going to be changing that I think you will really enjoy once we've had an opportunity to get through and show you. There's going to be a new search layout and options, so it'll be much easier to search, view your tickets through the search, and just make specific sorting and criteria, which is quite great. The next item will be new account settings and options. So you'll now have all your account settings in one section instead of a couple of different areas. And of course, we're going to improve some of the map tutorial because there are some items that are changing. Next, please. For members and excavators who parse their notifications or the confirmations you receive, please note that there will be some technical changes that you will need to make. Because we're renaming some of the fields or adding new ones, there will be technical things to change by yourselves to avoid disruption of receiving or parsing these notifications. So we will give you a 9 to 12 month notice of what exactly is changing so you can begin to make those changes on your end. Next, please. And finally, as has been mentioned, Ontario One Call will be doing a beta test for this project. We're going to be looking for volunteers from external help to be able to make sure that we're getting this correct and that we haven't missed anything major. So in Q4 2020, we will be doing a call for volunteers. There will be a registration form available. And if you meet specific IT requirements, which is going to be some basic things, as well as are able to meet our time requirements, 1 to 2 months, we would be very happy to have you helping us out. So look out for that then, and it'll be beginning early 2021 for the testing. Thank you very much for your time, and back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Katie. And now Ian Simpson will provide us an update on our exciting marketing program.
Perfect, Scott. Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you everyone for being here. Very glad to have you join us. I'm actually going to do an overview of marketing, education, and compliance. And first, I'm going to start off with marketing. 2019 was a good year for Ontario One Call's marketing. Our general awareness or homeowner campaign focused not only on creating awareness, but really trying to link being safe and protecting the ones you love by the need to call Ontario One Call before you dig. This slide shows some of the creative we used last year. If you go to the next slide there, we incorporated many different tactics in order to get the message out. And some of it was traditional media. We launched 2 brand new commercials last year, as well as integrated through radio as well. And then if you go to the next slide, it shows some of our retail partners. We had phenomenal participation last year from some retail partners who put up signage and displays and educated the public about the need to call or click before you dig. Here's some examples from Home Depot's To a Rental, as well as other places that helped us were nurseries like Sheridan Nursery, Garden Gallery, and Conon Nursery as well. We had over 109 stores participate, which was phenomenal. We also began our targeting very specific into digital campaigns in order to really catch people before they were going to grab a shovel and start digging. And that continues on to our 2020 campaign as well. One of the other things we worked on with the next slide here is we were trying to change our look and feel when people experienced our brand for the first time. So we did a switch over on our website in order to give more of a modern look and feel and some navigation ways of getting more education and more content. We also, with this facelift, officially launched our Ontario One Call.ca, which is a new URL we are using, in order to help people find us easier when they do Google searches as well. And on this page, under the resource section, we incorporated a marketing and education toolkit, which a lot of our stakeholders, and thank you so much, participated in last year and have actually picked up steam this year as well. On our website, if you go to OntarioOneCall.ca, under resources, we have a marketing and education toolkit where all stakeholders can grab pieces of marketing and education material in order to help spread the message and keep everything consistent. So everything in here from collateral pieces like brochures and posters to equipment and vehicle stickers, logos, graphics, videos, social media suggestions. And when Dig Safe Month comes around again next year, we do have one specific section on Dig Safe Month as well. And this really helps keep our messaging consistent. With the participation of the stakeholders last year, as well as the efforts we put forward, we did have a lift in awareness, which is a great success for us. So if you go to the next slide there, it shows that we had a lift of over 10% in aided awareness, which is a great success. But marketing is a continual effort, and it takes repeated effort in order to get people to make sure that Ontario One Call and call or click before you dig is top of mind within the province. We did an independent study, and our independent study showed us that we still have low awareness scores across the board with the general public. 4 out of 10 people within the province of Ontario are only aware of Ontario One Call, call before you dig, call or click before you dig, click before you dig, locates, only when they have recently seen an ad or have had someone interact with them about it. So what we found with the independent study is less than 1 in 10 Ontarians, if they are planning to do something spontaneously and grab a shovel, will not think about calling in for locates unless we get in front of them first. So if we can get in front of them in that planning stage, then they're more likely to reach out to us. And this is where we need your help, because we need to get that number up so that more Ontarians use our services to keep everyone safe. And if you go to the next slide there, first thing we need everyone to do is to change your web links and your printed materials to make sure we are putting out a consistent message. So our URL is ontario1call.ca. Our old URL still works to get people to this website, but we don't want to create any confusion out there or broken links if you're trying to go specifically on our website. So I'm asking all the stakeholders here that if you're talking to communication teams and your web teams, please just go to your website and just look at the URLs and just make sure it's updated. And if you're printing any bills or inserts or brochures, or you're printing something on envelopes, or you're sending out communications, just make sure it says ontario1call.ca, because we really, need to do this as an effort together. And in order to keep everything consistent, I just want to plug again, if you go to the next slide there, our resources page on ontario1call.ca, where you can grab materials and use them to help create a look and feel for our brand that's consistent. On this site right now is our 2020 campaign, and our focus this year on the campaign is to get people to understand that any size project matters, every project. Our independent study showed us that most people, if they think about locates, think it's for excavators or large equipment, or if you're doing a big project. And what we want to do is get, for the general awareness campaign out here, is to get people to understand that even if it's small, even if it's for a small little tree, you still need to call or click before you dig. And this year, our campaign is trying to get people to understand small digs matter and we're using the Get the Dirt campaign, which is a play on getting information to keep people safe. So please utilize our materials and reach out to me at Ontario One Call if you're working on any projects and you want to get more materials from us. And that's our marketing update. I'll move on to education. Education is very exciting this year in 2020. We have a lot of things going on here. It's been mentioned a couple times during the presentations today that we are working on a project called the Professional Locate Administrator course. There is a great need in order to expand our educational resources and keep things consistent so everyone's on the same page, so we can help solve some of the issues that we're having in the industry with communication, with late locates, and other troubles that we are seeing in the industry. So the Professional Locate Administrator course is very exciting, and it's launching this fall. We call it PLAC for short, P-L-A-C, so the Professional Locate Administrator course. This is an in-depth course that gives an understanding of all the steps necessary to effectively manage locates within the province of Ontario. If you flip the slide here, you see one of our education coaches, which is one of the coaches you will see on the online platform. We call her Renee for short. Renee will actually help people through the course, which is designed to create expert locate administrators. If you go to the next slide here, it shows some of the snapshots of some of the things that we use as interactive tools. The learners will go through an experiential journey. They go through 9 modules, which use some of these interactive tools that you may see here in order to help the learner understand the material better. All learners can learn at their own pace and review the materials as many times as they like as they go through the course of the program. If you flip to the next slide, just give some more snapshots here. There are a bunch of topics that are included in here. Just as a highlight, we'll be touching on hazard identification, we'll be touching on what is damage prevention, the areas of damage prevention. We'll be touching on the rules, regulations, regulators, how everything works together. There will be a great understanding on how to plan for a project, as well as the types of locate requests and how to use them, when to use them. And there will be a great emphasis on the importance to get accurate locate requests in order to get your timely delivery of locates. We'll be emphasizing on how to use the tools, so you become an expert on how to use the tools within the system, how to do proper map selections, and there will be a section, one section completely that is based on troubleshooting. And in the troubleshooting section, it'll show you how to set yourself up for success to get timely locate delivery, how to deal with issues like late locates, fixing incorrect tickets, how to cancel locates, how to do proper renegotiation of locates, and so much more. If you go to the next slide here. Just as a wrap up, what I want to tell people is that if you're taking this course, whether you're a professional already in the industry, and this is a refresher, or you're brand new to the industry, when finished, the person who is taking this course will become an expert and the go-to person within any organization to answer questions about locates and locate management. So pre-orders for this program will start around Labor Day this year, and the official launch date will be at the end of September. And if you want more updates on what's going on with this program and how things are going forward, please feel free to visit our Learning Center page on OntarioOneCall.ca, and we'll update news as we go. I'll just move on to the next slide here. So that's some of the exciting stuff that's going on in education. I also wanted to provide a quick overview of compliance on how it looked in 2019. So I'm going to show you a variety of stats and graphs here and explain what we saw in order to give you a glimpse into what was going on in the industry. So this first chart you see here on the right-hand side, you see a year-over-year comparison of total number of complaints that came into Ontario One Call. So our compliance investigators with complaint volumes. So if you look at this chart, you see that there is 4 years mapped out here from 2016 and 2019. You see that 2019, which is light gray, had a massive spike. We had more complaints filed in 2019 than any other year. And as you can see, when the complaint started in April, it just kept going up and up and up and up and up. It was one of our worst years for complaints. As for the numbers themselves, the complaints, what were they? Almost 1,900 of these complaints, so 1,858, were against members themselves. And then 2 of the complaints were against excavators. If you could flip to the next slide there, I'll break it down even more. So what were these complaints? So complaints come in for a variety of reasons. The number one complaint was late locates, and that's why late locate symposium happened and a lot of the other things that the industry is trying to do in order to solve late locates. But other things like false renegotiated dates, delinquent accounts, incomplete locates, emergency abuses. There is 2 columns here you see, valid totals and invalid totals. Just wanted to let you know what that is. When we get complaints in, they either go in one of the 2 categories. Valid complaints just means that it is an actual violation within our Act or Schedule 2 or Bylaw 2. An invalid complaint is one where it might have been a complaint that came in, but the member or whoever the complaint was generated towards did not either fall into our Act or they were compliant at the time that the complaint came in. Just a note about late locates, the valid total that came in this year was, just almost 1,800. Just wanted to note in that a complaint does not mean 1 ticket. A lot of times with our complaints that come in, it is more than 1 ticket as well. So the total number of tickets that were involved in late locates this year was just under 4,000, 3,993. If we go to the next slide here, it actually shows a breakdown of the geographic areas. So these are the areas where the complaints came in. So if you're looking at this for the very first time, at the top here, we have 2016, 2017, all the way to 2019. I'm going to divert your focus if you're trying to look at the numbers really quickly. 2016, if you go down to the bottom, you see Toronto. Toronto at the bottom here from 2016 to 2018 was the hot spot for the volume of of complaints just in general. Every single year for those 3 years, they were the top area. In 2019, we saw a switch. We saw a switch where Toronto, even though very high still, was no longer the #1 spot. Hamilton Niagara became one of the hotbeds for complaints in 2019. And other areas of concern that came in were Ontario West, Toronto, as I said, Ontario North, and Ontario East as well. Now, looking at these stats and going into 2020 right now, the hope is that 2020 will show a much better year, especially in these areas, because we hyper-focused as a department, especially with education and training and compliance, in order to try to work with members and stakeholders in the different groups in order to help alleviate these issues. We did some regional meetings. We did some forecasting meetings in these areas as well as with the initiatives brought forward by the Late Locate Symposium and the educational components right now, which are talking about the need of everyone to work together to find solutions. We're very hopeful that 2020 will produce a better year. And on the last slide here, just to bring this around, one of the main things that keep coming up, whether we're doing our own events that we're part of or industry events that we're part of, is the need for greater education on a mass scale in order to get people on the same page so that we're all working together. So with the launch of the Professional Locate Administrator course coming this fall, we're hoping for more individuals to be able to get on the same page in order to solve some of the issues that we're seeing in our compliance numbers. And Scott, I'm going to pass it back on to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ian. At this time, we're going to open up the voting on bylaw and fee schedule changes. So those of you who are casting ballots on behalf of a member, you will have already received the link to vote electronically. You may vote at any time, starting now. Voting will be open until 11 p.m. tonight. If you have any questions on voting, please contact Corey Officer at his email. So that is the conclusion of our agenda today. I would like to thank everyone for participating. A special thanks to the Ontario One Call staff who helped ensure that today's meeting ran smoothly. No small task given these circumstances. I am now looking for a motion to declare the 2020 Ontario One Call AGM adjourned.
It's Rico Scalera. I move the motion.
This is Dean Delpy. I second the motion.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. The motion is carried, and this concludes our AGM. Bye for now, everyone.